According to a theory hypothesized by Neil Howe and William Strauss in the mid-1990s known as the fourth turning, the USA and the world experiences a turning every 20 to 25 years as one generation displaces another as the leading one, and the dynamic between one particular generation entering elderhood and another entering young adulthood creates a crisis every 80 to 100 years. In a never-ending cycle, summarized by the phrase, hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. And weak men create hard times, a phrase coined by the author G. Michael Hopf. The authors wrote in the mid-1990s that the next crisis era would start around 2005 and climax around 2020, and would involve a struggle between millennials and boomers and battle over the ultimate direction of the world. In the years that followed after the book's publication, the predictions started to take shape. From the 2008 global financial crisis can be seen as the catalyst, and in the decade that followed various civil movements have appeared to challenge the status quo. There are many parallels that are occurring which is to be expected from the fourth turning period identified by Strauss-Howe. With the Strauss-Howe generational theory, historical events are associated with recurring generational personas, known as archetypes. Each generational character releases a new era, defined as a turning, lasting around 20 to 25 years, in which a new social, political, and economic climate exists. They are part of a larger cyclical cyculum, a long human life, which spans between 80 and 100 years, with a crisis occurring after every cyculum, 80 to 100-year period, which is then preceded by a recovery, high, which during this period, a nation's institutions and community values are strong, which are then eventually succeeded by generational archetypes which attack and weaken institutions in the name of individualism, and eventually leads to a turbulent political environment that develops conditions for another crisis. Strauss and Howe identified a recurring pattern of 4 generational types which popularized the idea that people in a particular age group generally share a distinct set of beliefs, attitudes, values and behaviors because they all grow up and come of age during a particular period in history. Strauss and Howe define a social generation as the aggregate of all people born over a span of roughly 20 years or about the length of one phase of life: childhood, young adulthood, midlife, and old age. Generations are identified and shaped by key historical events and social trends, and they share certain common beliefs and behaviors. Strauss and Howe described a theorized pattern with the historical generations, which is a 4-stage cycle of social eras which they call turnings. The turnings include the high, the awakening, the unraveling, and the crisis. The first turning is a high, occurring following a crisis. During the high, institutions are considered strong and individualism is weak. Mainstream society is confident about its direction. According to the authors, the most recent first turning in the U.S. was the post-World War II, beginning in 1946 and ending with the assassination of John F. Kennedy on November 22, 1963. The second turning is an awakening, an era when institutions are attacked in the name of personal and spiritual autonomy. When society is making its high of public progress, people become tired of social discipline and want to recapture a sense of individualism. Strauss and Howe say the U.S.'s most recent awakening was the consciousness revolution, which spanned from the campus and inner-city revolts of the mid-1960s to the tax revolts of the early 1980s. The third turning is an unraveling, an era which can be considered as the opposite of a high. Institutions are weak and distrusted, while individualism is strong and flourishing. Unravelings come after awakenings when society wants to fragment. Strauss and Howe consider the most recent unraveling in the USA began in the 1980s and includes the long boom and culture war. The fourth turning is a crisis, an era of destruction, often involving war or revolution, in which institutions are destroyed and rebuilt. After the crisis, civic authority revives, cultural expression redirects towards community purpose once again. Strauss and Howe consider the previous fourth turning in the U.S. commenced with the Wall Street crash of 1929 and climaxed with the end of World War II. The GI generation, which they call a hero archetype, born 1901 to 1924, came of age during this era. This generation displayed a confidence, optimism, and collective outlook which symbolized the mood of that era. The authors assert the millennial generation, which they also describe as a hero archetype, born 1982 to 2004, show many similar traits to those of the GI youth. Generational change drives the cycle of turnings and defines its timing. Each generation ages into the next life phase, and with it the general mood and behavior of society profoundly changes, giving rise to a new turning. Each of the 4 turnings has a distinct mood that repeats every cyclium. Strauss and Howe describe these turnings as the seasons of history. Strauss and Howe state that 2 different types of eras and 2 formative age locations associated with them, childhood and young adulthood, produce 4 generational archetypes that repeat consecutively, in rhythm with the cycle of crises and awakenings. They classify these 4 archetypes as prophet, nomad, hero, and artist. The generations in each archetype share attitudes towards family, risk, culture and values, and civic engagement. Generations that are shaped by similar early life experiences develop similar collective personas and follow similar life trajectories. The archetypes are as follows. Prophet, idealist, generations enter childhood during a time of rejuvenated community life and consensus around a new societal order. Prophets grow up as the spoiled children of this post-crisis era, come of age as self-absorbed young crusaders of an awakening, focus on morals and principles in midlife, and emerge as elders guiding another crisis. Examples: transcendental generation, missionary generation, baby boomers. Nomad, reactive, generations enter childhood during an awakening, a time of social ideals and spiritual agendas, when young adults are attacking the established institutional order. Nomads grow up as underprotected children during this awakening, come of age as alienated, post-awakening young adults, become pragmatic midlife leaders during a crisis, and age into resilient post-crisis elders. Examples: Gilded Generation, Lost Generation, Generation X. Hero, civic, generations enter childhood during an unraveling, a time of individual pragmatism and self-reliance. Heroes grow up as increasingly protected post-awakening children, come of age as young optimists during a crisis, emerge as energetic, overconfident midlifers, and age into politically powerful elders attacked by another awakening. Examples: Republican Generation, GI Generation, Millennials. Artist, adaptive, generations enter childhood during a crisis, a time when great dangers lead to pursuing public consensus, aggressive institutions, and personal sacrifice. Artists grow up overprotected by adults preoccupied with the crisis, come of age as the socialized and conformist young adults of a post-crisis world, break out as process-oriented midlife leaders during an awakening, and age into thoughtful post-awakening elders. Examples: Progressive Generation, Silent Generation, Zoomer Generation. As of now, we are in the 4th turning and a time of crisis for the rest of the decade. 2030 onwards we should expect to start a new cycle and reach a high again as part of the first turning.